And today we ask our fellow colleagues to stand with us to protect the U.S. economy from $3.2 billion in retaliatory tariffs being applied to our exports to Canada and Mexico every year. A recent ruling from the World Trade Organization found for the fourth and final time that our country of origin labeling program for meat, or what the acronym says is COOL, to which it is often referred, that this labeling program violates our trade agreements with our two closest trading partners. Mr. President, this debate isn't about the merits of a particular labeling program or our opinions about how our beef or pork or chicken should be sold. No, this debate is about a simple fact, and facts are stubborn things. Whether you support COOL or whether you oppose COOL, the fact is retaliation is coming unless the Senate acts to stop this program that the WTO has found to be discriminatory. Over the years, this body has attempted many times to craft a workable COOL program for all stakeholders while still living up to our international trade obligations. Congress, through directives in the 2002 Farm Bill and the 2008 Farm Bill, required the establishment of COOL for meat. Through regulations issued in 2009 and revised in 2013, the Department of Agriculture made several attempts to implement a workable and WTO-compliant COOL program. However, as I mentioned earlier, again and again, the WTO ruled in favor of Canada and Mexico. On 4 occasions, Mr. President, 4, our trade regulator ruled that the U.S. policy did not live up to our international trade obligations and disadvantage our best trading partners, Canada and Mexico. Now, some have suggested that we should salvage this labeling program by once again making more changes. However, simply changing certain aspects of the program will not prevent the $3.2 billion in retaliation from damaging our economy. Now, Mr. President, you don't have to take my word for it. My colleagues, you don't have to take my word for it. Here is the statement issued just today, from the Canadian government, which will determine whether or not retaliation on U.S. products will take effect in the near future. Quote, "The only acceptable outcome remains for the United States to repeal COOL or face $3 billion in annual retaliation." Now, Mr. President, I have worked with many of my colleagues over the years and over the last few weeks to craft a solution that meets the needs of all stakeholders. However, after all of our work, it is clear that to protect our economy, to ensure Canada and Mexico drop their pursuit of retaliation on U.S. exports, we must first take up the House-passed bill repealing COOL, a bipartisan bill that received 300 votes in the House of Representatives. The damages that Canada and Mexico are seeking are immense. Over $3.2 billion in sanctions on U.S. products is probable if we do not repeal COOL, and these are not just agriculture products in the crosshairs. Products including beef and pork and cherries and ethanol, repeat, and ethanol, wine, orange juice, jewelry, even mattresses, furniture, parts for heating appliances are just some of the targets of the Canadian retaliation. Mexico has yet to finalize their list, but we expect it to be just as damaging. California alone has $4 billion in exports to Canada at risk. Florida, Illinois, Iowa, Michigan, Minnesota, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Texas, Washington, and Wisconsin each have roughly $1 billion in exports from their state at risk from the Canadian retaliation alone. And I remind my colleagues that again today, Canada released a statement in response to legislation authored by others that reaffirmed their position. And I quote, this is the statement, quote, "The U.S. Senate must follow the lead of the House of Representatives and put forward legislation that repeals COOL once and for all." Now, I must emphasize to my colleagues that retaliation is fast approaching, and the responsibility sits squarely on our shoulders to avoid it. Regardless of what farm groups, the Department of Agriculture, or the USTR say, or regardless of what some members would like, Canada and Mexico, and only Canada and Mexico, have the ability to halt retaliation. So this takes me back to the beginning of my statement. It doesn't matter if you support COOL or if you oppose COOL. You cannot ignore the fact that retaliation is imminent and that we must avoid it. Repeal of mandatory COOL is necessary to protect the U.S. economy from damaging sanctions, and our amendment will accomplish just that. Mr. President, I thank you. I urge my colleagues to adopt the amendment, and I note the absence of a quorum.